There are people who don't just walk through life, they wade through it. Every conversation carries weight, every silence holds meaning. They notice the tremor in a voice, the shift in someone's eyes, the unspoken pain hovering just beneath polite words. While others move through the world with ease, these people feel the texture of existence itself pressing against their skin. Thomas Merton once wrote that the gift of awareness is also a burden. And perhaps no one understood this paradox better than he did. A man who saw too clearly, felt too deeply, and paid the price for living with eyes wide open in a world that prefers to dream. But here's what most people miss about awareness. It's not just about seeing more, it's about carrying more. It's about walking through a room and absorbing every unspoken tension, every hidden sorrow, every fragile hope that others leave behind without a second thought. And the strange thing is, this isn't a skill you choose to develop. It's something that chooses you. One day you simply realize you've been living in a different dimension than everyone around you, not above them, not below them, but somehow adjacent to the reality they inhabit. Merton understood this isolation intimately. Here was a man who retreated to a monastery seeking silence, only to discover that silence amplifies everything. In the quiet, he heard the world screaming. In solitude, he felt the pulse of humanity more intensely than he ever had in crowds. He thought withdrawing would bring peace, but instead it sharpened his vision until he could see the invisible threads connecting all suffering, all longing, all human confusion. And this is where the danger begins. When you see what others don't see, you start to believe you're responsible for what you perceive. You notice someone's pain, and suddenly it becomes yours to fix. You sense the dysfunction in a system, and you feel obligated to repair it. You recognize the lies people tell themselves, and you think it's your duty to wake them up. But here's the brutal truth. Most people don't want to be awakened. They've built their lives on comfortable illusions, and your clarity feels like an attack on everything they've worked to maintain. I once knew someone who could walk into a family gathering and immediately sense which relationships were fracturing, which old wounds were festering beneath the laughter, which conversations were really arguments disguised as small talk. She didn't try to have this perception. It simply existed, and for years she thought her role was to bring everything into the light, to facilitate healing, to speak the truths everyone else avoided. But each time she tried, she became the problem. She became the one who made things awkward, the one who couldn't just let things be, the one who thought too much about everything. The pain of this rejection is particular and profound, because when you see clearly, you're not just seeing the surface, you're seeing potential. You're seeing who people could become if they faced their shadows. You're seeing the beauty that would emerge if they stopped performing and started being real. And when they reject your vision, it feels like they're rejecting their own possibility. It feels like watching someone choose a smaller life when a larger one is right there, waiting. Merton grappled with this constantly. His journals are filled with the anguish of a man who saw the violence embedded in society's structures, the spiritual emptiness beneath material success, the deep loneliness masquerading as connection. He wrote with urgency, trying to wake people up to the systems destroying their souls. But he also knew the futility of forcing sight on those who prefer blindness. He knew that truth offered too soon becomes just another thing to reject. And so you learn to be careful with what you see. You learn to edit yourself in conversations. You learn which insights to share and which to keep locked away. You develop a kind of double consciousness, one part of you engaging with the surface reality everyone else accepts, another part watching from a distance, taking note of everything beneath. And this split, this constant translation between what you perceive and what you're allowed to express, it exhausts you in ways that are hard to explain to people who live in one world instead of two. There's a particular loneliness in this experience. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling fundamentally unseen. Because how do you explain to someone that their casual comment revealed a deep fear they don't even know they have? How do you tell someone that the story they just told about their childhood actually explains the entire pattern of their adult relationships? You can't. So you smile and nod and keep these observations to yourself. and part of you withers from the constant silence. Merton called this the burden of contemplation. He described it as living with a kind of spiritual vertigo, where you're simultaneously deeply connected to everything and profoundly alienated from the everyday world. You feel the suffering of strangers as if it were your own. You recognize patterns in history, repeating themselves with tragic precision. You see the ways people imprison themselves and call it freedom, numb themselves and call it peace, hide from themselves and call it self-care. But here's what happens when you carry this awareness without wisdom to hold it. You start to feel superior. You don't mean to. It creeps in subtly, dressed as compassion or concern. You look at people living unconsciously and you pity them. You watch them chase shallow goals and you feel sad for their ignorance. And this subtle sense of elevation, this quiet condescension, it separates you even further from the human connection you're longing for. Because here's the paradox Merton discovered after decades of contemplation. Seeing more doesn't make you better. Understanding more doesn't make you wiser. Perceiving more doesn't make you more evolved. It just makes you different. And the moment you forget that, the moment you start believing your awareness gives you some special status, you've lost the very thing that made your perception valuable in the first place. Humility. There's a story about Merton in his later years, after decades of monastic life, finally being allowed to travel to Asia. He met with Buddhist monks and Tibetan masters, expecting to encounter people on his level, fellow seekers who saw what he saw. And what struck him most wasn't how enlightened they were, it was how ordinary they allowed themselves to be. They carried profound wisdom without the weight of it. They saw clearly without the burden of thinking. Their sight obligated them to fix everything they perceived. This is the lesson hidden in the danger. The gift isn't just seeing, it's learning what to do with what you see. And sometimes, often even, the wisest thing to do is nothing, to witness without interfering. To understand without explaining, to perceive without trying to change. Think about water for a moment. Water takes the shape of whatever contains it, but it doesn't become the container. It adapts without losing itself. It flows around obstacles instead of trying to destroy them. It finds the lowest point without considering this a loss of dignity. And people who see deeply need to learn this same fluid wisdom, to move through the world without constantly colliding with it, to observe without always needing to act. But this restraint is harder than it sounds. Because when you see someone you love walking toward pain, every instinct screams at you to intervene. When you recognize a pattern that's going to end badly, staying silent feels like complicity. When you understand exactly what someone needs to hear to break free from their suffering, keeping it to yourself feels cruel. And yet, Merton learned that unsolicited truth rarely liberates. It usually just alienates. People arrive at insight on their own timeline, not yours. Their journey toward awareness might look different than yours did. They might need to make mistakes you could help them avoid. They might need to suffer through lessons you already learned. And your role isn't to be their shortcut. Your role is to be present without being intrusive, available without being pushy, clear without being harsh. There's a particular kind of pain in watching people you care about make choices you know will hurt them. It's the pain of biting your tongue when you want to shout. It's the pain of offering gentle suggestions that get ignored. It's the pain of seeing someone's potential and watching them settle for less. And the temptation is strong to force the issue, to push harder, to make them see what you see. But force breaks things. Urgency creates resistance. And the harder you push your perception onto others, the more they'll defend themselves against it. Merton understood this. He wrote about truth being like a seed. You can plant it, water it, create conditions for it to grow, but you can't make it sprout on your timeline. It has its own season, its own pace, its own way of breaking through the soil. So what do you do with eyes that see too much? What do you do with a heart that feels too deeply? What do you do when awareness itself becomes a weight you're tired of carrying? You learn discernment, not the discernment of what's true, that comes easily to you, but the discernment of what's yours to carry and what isn't. The discernment of when to speak and when silence serves better. The discernment of which battles matter and which are just your ego wanting to be right. You learn that seeing clearly doesn't obligate you to fix everything you perceive. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply witness. To see someone's pain without trying to take it away. To notice dysfunction without appointing yourself the healer. To recognize truth without forcing others to acknowledge it. This isn't passivity. It's not apathy. It's not giving up. It's understanding that your awareness is a gift for you, not necessarily for everyone around you. It's recognizing that people are on their own journeys, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is respect their path, even when you can see where it leads. Merton spent years trying to change the world with his words. He wrote about war, injustice, spiritual emptiness, societal violence. He thought if he could just articulate the truth clearly enough, people would wake up. But over time he realized that his writing wasn't changing the world. It was changing him. The act of seeing and naming reality was transforming his own consciousness, regardless of whether anyone else was listening. And this might be the deepest lesson buried in the danger of seeing. Your perception isn't primarily for others, it's for you. It's shaping you, refining you, teaching you how to be human in a more complete way. And yes, sometimes your insights will help others. Sometimes your words will land exactly when someone needs them. Sometimes your ability to see what others miss will make a genuine difference, but those moments aren't guaranteed. And if you make your peace contingent on changing others, on being understood, on having your perceptions validated, you'll live in constant frustration. Because most of the time, people won't get it. Most of the time, your depth will intimidate them or confuse them or make them uncomfortable. Most of the time, you'll be too much or not enough or somehow wrong for simply being who you are. The question becomes, can you live with this? Can you continue seeing clearly, even when others prefer blindness? Can you maintain your depth, even when the world rewards shallowness? Can you stay awake in a culture that's constantly trying to sedate you with distractions and comfort and easy answers? Merton would say yes, but not without struggle. Yes, but not without loneliness. Yes, but not without moments of doubt where you wonder if maybe ignorance really is bliss. Yes, but not without developing a kind of fierce tenderness toward yourself and others, fierce in protecting your truth, tender in allowing others their journey. There's a late journal entry where Merton describes watching sunrise from his hermitage, feeling completely alone and completely connected at the same time. He writes about the stillness of that moment, the way clarity and confusion coexisted, the way peace and pain danced together in his chest. And he concludes that perhaps this is what it means to see truly, to hold all the contradictions without needing to resolve them, to embrace the complexity without demanding simplicity. Because the danger of seeing what others don't isn't just that you'll be lonely or misunderstood or burdened with knowledge you didn't ask for. The real danger is that you'll harden, that you'll let the weight of perception turn you bitter, that you'll mistake your clarity for superiority, that you'll use your insight as a weapon instead of a lantern. The real danger is forgetting that everyone is doing their best with the consciousness they currently have access to. The real danger is losing compassion for people who can't see what you see. The real danger is believing that awareness alone makes you wise, when wisdom actually comes from how you hold your awareness, with humility, with patience, with love. And so you practice. You practice seeing without judging. You practice understanding without fixing. You practice knowing without needing to prove. You practice being right without needing others to admit you're right. You practice carrying your truth lightly, offering it freely, and releasing attachment to whether anyone receives it. This is the path Merton walked in his final years. Less urgency, more presence, less pushing, more allowing, less certainty about having answers, more comfort with living in questions. He softened without losing his edge. He quieted without losing his voice. He learned that the goal wasn't to make others see what he saw. It was to see with such clarity and compassion that his very being became an invitation to deeper awareness. And maybe that's what we're all called to do when we're cursed and blessed with seeing, not to drag others into our vision, but to live our vision so fully that it becomes magnetic rather than forceful. Not to explain our depth to those who prefer surfaces, but to dive deeper ourselves and trust that the genuine seekers will find their way to similar waters. Because here's what Merton discovered. The people who are meant to understand you will. Without long explanations, without having to prove yourself, without diminishing your truth to make it more palatable. They'll recognize something in your eyes, your words, your energy that matches something in themselves. And that recognition will feel like coming home after a long exile. The others, the ones who don't get it, who can't hold the complexity you carry, who need you to be simpler than you are, they're not your people. And that's okay. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need to be accessible to people who aren't willing to meet you where you are. You just need to stay true to what you see, feel what you feel, and trust that your particular flavor of awareness exists for a reason. There's a wisdom tradition that says when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But it works in reverse too. When you're ready to fully inhabit your truth, the people who can appreciate it appear. Not because you manifested them, but because you stopped hiding yourself. You stopped performing normalcy. You stopped apologizing for your depth. And this is where something shifts, where the burden begins to lighten. Not because you see less, you'll never unsee what you've seen, but because you stop needing your vision to be validated by those who can't share it. You stop measuring your worth by how many people understand you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold your fullness. Merton wrote extensively about what he called true self versus false self. The false self, he said, is the version of ourselves we construct to meet external expectations, to gain approval, to avoid rejection. It's the mask we wear to make others comfortable. And for people who see deeply, this mask becomes particularly heavy because the gap between what they perceive and what they're allowed to express grows wider with each passing year. The true self, by contrast, is what remains when all the performing stops. It's your unedited awareness, your raw perception, your authentic response to reality as you experience it, not as others tell you it should be experienced. And the journey Merton described, the journey from false self to true self, is essentially the journey of learning to trust your own seeing, even when it sets you apart. But here's what makes this journey so difficult. Society is designed to reward conformity, not authenticity. It's designed to celebrate those who stay on the surface, not those who dive deep. It's designed to punish deviation from consensus reality, even when that consensus is built on collective delusion. And so when you choose to honor what you see, when you choose to speak from your true self rather than your false self, there's almost always a cost. Sometimes the cost is professional. You're the one who asks uncomfortable questions in meetings, who points out the elephant in the room, who refuses to pretend the emperor is clothed. And this doesn't make you popular. It makes you difficult. It makes you the problem, even when you're just naming problems that already exist. Sometimes the cost is social. You're at a party and everyone's having superficial fun, and you can see the loneliness beneath the laughter, the desperation beneath the drinking, the fear beneath the forced enthusiasm. And you have a choice: participate in the illusion or stand outside it. Either way, you lose something. Either you betray what you see, or you accept the isolation that comes with refusing to pretend. Sometimes the cost is intimate. You're in a relationship with someone you love, and you can see their patterns, their defenses, their wounds. You can see exactly what they need to heal, exactly what they need to hear, exactly what they need to face. But they're not ready. And you have to decide. Do you push anyway and risk the relationship, or do you hold back and watch them suffer through lessons you could help them skip? There's no easy answer to these questions. Merton wrestled with them his entire life. In his monastery, surrounded by men committed to the same spiritual path, he still felt profoundly alone because even there, he saw what others didn't. He saw the ways monastic life could become just another escape, another performance, another false self dressed in religious clothing. He saw the violence in absolute obedience, the danger in unquestioned authority, the shadow hiding beneath devotional practice. And he spoke about these things. Not always, not to everyone, but enough to make himself controversial, even within his own community. Enough to be seen as troublesome, as too critical, as someone who couldn't just appreciate the good without pointing out the flaws. But he kept speaking anyway because for him, silence about what he saw felt like a deeper betrayal than the discomfort his truth-telling caused. This is the tightrope that aware people walk, between honoring what they see and honoring the relationships they value, between truth and kindness, between clarity and connection. And there's no formula for walking this line perfectly. You'll lean too far one way sometimes, too far the other way other times. You'll speak when you should have stayed silent. You'll stay silent when you should have spoken. You'll push when you should have waited. You'll wait when you should have pushed. But here's what Merton eventually understood. The goal isn't perfection in how you navigate your awareness. The goal is authenticity. The goal is living in alignment with what you actually see, feel, and know, while also holding space for the fact that others are doing the same from their level of consciousness. The goal is being truthful without being cruel, clear without being harsh, honest without being brutal. And sometimes, often even, this means accepting that your truth will make people uncomfortable, that your perception will challenge their worldview, that your refusal to pretend will disturb their peace. And that's okay. Uncomfortable isn't the same as harmful. Challenge isn't the same as attack. Disturbance isn't the same as destruction. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's delusion. Sometimes the deepest respect you can show is believing they're strong enough to handle truth. Sometimes the greatest gift you can offer is your unwillingness to pretend, because your honesty gives them permission to stop pretending too. But this only works when it comes from love, not from superiority. When it comes from genuine care, not from the need to be right. When it comes from faith in their capacity to grow, not from judgment about where they currently are. And this is the razor's edge, using your perception to serve rather than to wound, to illuminate rather than to expose, to invite rather than to attack. Merton understood that the contemplative life, the life of deep seeing, is ultimately a life of service. Not service in the conventional sense of doing things for people, but service in the sense of holding space for truth in a world that's constantly trying to avoid it. Service in the sense of remaining awake so that others who are ready to wake up have someone to recognize them when they do. Service in the sense of being a living reminder that there's more to existence than the surface reality we've collectively agreed to call normal. This kind of service is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists quietly, consistently, like a lighthouse that doesn't chase ships, but trusts that those who need its light will find it. And this is perhaps the final transformation that deep seeing requires, moving from the need to save everyone to the willingness to simply be a presence that others can meet if and when they're ready. There's a particular peace that comes with this understanding. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of acceptance. Not the peace of everyone finally understanding you, but the peace of no longer needing them to. Not the peace of changing the world, but the peace of being faithful to what you see, regardless of whether the world changes in response. Merton's final message, written shortly before his unexpected death, was about the contemplative life being available to everyone, not as a retreat from the world, but as a way of engaging more fully with it. He said that seeing deeply isn't about escaping reality, but about encountering it more completely. And the danger isn't in the seeing itself. It's in what we do with it. Will we let it isolate us, or will we let it connect us more authentically to those who are ready for authentic connection? Will we use it to feel superior, or will we use it to serve what wants to emerge? Will we guard it jealously, or will we offer it generously while respecting that not everyone is ready to receive it? These are the questions that transform danger into gift. These are the choices that turn burden into purpose. These are the practices that allow us to see clearly without being crushed by the weight of clarity. In the end, living awake in a sleeping world isn't about carrying the weight of everyone's dreams. It's about learning to walk lightly, even when you see heavily. It's about maintaining your vision without demanding others share it. It's about being simultaneously engaged and detached, caring deeply while holding loosely, seeing everything while grasping nothing. It's about understanding that your awareness is both curse and blessing, both gift and challenge, both isolation and invitation. And the wisdom isn't in choosing one or the other. It's in learning to hold both, to dance between them, to let the tension refine you rather than define you, because maybe the real purpose of seeing what others don't isn't to change them. Maybe it's to change you, to make you more patient, more compassionate, more humble. To teach you that truth without timing is just noise, that insight without invitation is just intrusion, that clarity without kindness is just cruelty. Merton learned this slowly, painfully, beautifully, and he left us a map, not to his conclusions, but to the questions worth asking. Not to his answers, but to the awareness worth cultivating. Not to safety, but to truth. Not to comfort, but to consciousness. And perhaps that's enough. To see clearly, to feel deeply, to live honestly. To offer your truth without attachment to whether anyone receives it. To walk through the world with eyes wide open and heart undefended, knowing the danger, embracing it anyway, transforming it through how you choose to carry it. This is the invitation hidden in the curse. This is the gift wrapped in the burden. This is what it means to see what others don't. Not as superiority, not as isolation, but as a particular way of serving the truth that wants to move through you and into the world, one conscious moment at a time.